Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Drew McLellan. He is the CEO, also known as the top dog over at Agency Management Institute. He's also the host of the Build a Better Agency podcast. Drew, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on the show again.
Happy to be back. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. For anybody who didn't hear Drew's last episode here on B2B Growth, go check out episode 298, 5 Reasons Agency Owners Should Start a Podcast. Today, Drew, we're going to be talking about how agencies can create 50 plus new pieces of content every year with the time that they still have allotted, a struggle that a lot of agencies are dealing with. Before we jump straight into that conversation, though, Drew, I would love for you to give a little bit of background for yourself and AMI for listeners who aren't familiar with you yet.
Yeah, sure. Agency Management Institute has been around since the 90s. And the premise of it is that most agency owners are accidental business owners. They were great at some aspect of agency life and woke up one day and went, oh, crap, I have 10 employees and I have to worry about payroll and what is this balance sheet and P&L and all of that sort of stuff. And so our job is to really help agency owners and leaders run the business of their agency better. And so we focus on best practices and key metrics, everything from finances to operations to biz dev and sales, all the way down to succession planning. Like, okay, 10 years from now, I want to be out. What does that look like? And what do I have to do today to make that happen? So we focus on the business side of agency life. And I think one of the things that makes us unique is that I am an agency owner. So I've owned my own agency for the past 24 years. I still own it. I still run it. And everybody who serves in an advisory capacity at AMI is an active agency owner, which I think makes us pretty unique in the space. We're walking the same walk. And so what we offer as good counsel, we know it works because it's working in our shops.
Yeah, I think that's always a good aspect of good advice, whether it's sales, agency ownership, whatever niche you're looking for, consultants, or you're looking for advice, people who are actually walking the walk and living things out day to day, solving the same challenges that you're looking for advice on. That's always a good place to start. On that note, James and I have been big fans of your podcast of Build a Better Agency. It breaks down a lot of those things very tangibly. So highly recommend for anybody in agency life to check out your podcast as well. So Drew, let's touch on one of those struggles. You touched on some of those that you guys help with at AMI for agency owners. And you were talking about this on LinkedIn recently. And James and I thought this would be great to break down for B2B growth listeners. And that's the need for agencies to create more thought leadership content with very little time. And it usually ends up in one of two directions, as you and I were talking about a little bit offline. Can you break those down for us a little bit?
Yeah. And, certainly my area of expertise is agencies. But when I put on my other hat, which is my agency owner hat, and I think about how we're counseling clients today, most of whom live in the B2B space for my agency, I will say that everything we're going to talk about is as applicable to just about any B2B company as it is for agencies. So although my examples and my comments will be agency centric, because that's the world that I live in, I will say that on the other side of my world, this is the exact same advice and counsel that we are giving our clients. So the challenge for most business owners, agency owners or B2B business owners, is that it's pretty tough to get noticed today. And it's pretty tough to differentiate yourself and not compete on price. And so one of the ways that we can differentiate ourselves and that we can really stand out in the marketplace is to be really known for something, to have a strong point of view, to have a subject matter expertise, to sort of have a lane that we swim in. And so when you have an area of specialty and you have a point of view inside that area of specialty, it's easier to create content that gets noticed. So one of the two mistakes that agency owners specifically make, and again, I think all business owners probably fall into this bucket, is that they write generic content. So I was saying to you offline, if I see one more agency write about the Pantone color of the year, I'm going to cry, because you literally could take whoever wrote its logo off of it and put somebody else's logo in their space on it. And it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. So one of the litmus tests for a business owner as they're creating content is this something we can uniquely own? Could all of our competitors publish this same piece with the same level of credibility as us? And if the answer is yes, then it's too generic. It's not different. It's not going to differentiate you in the marketplace. So now you're going to the effort without enjoying the benefit of what good strategic content can give you.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the directions that you can kind of flop, whether you're running a marketing team or running an agency, is to put out bland content that, like you said, takes the same amount of work, but doesn't give you the benefit. And I guess the other side is just not putting any content out at all, right?
Well, yeah, it's doing it like, so what I see a lot of agencies do is they'll have like a blog day where everybody has to come into the conference room and nobody gets to leave, even to go to the bathroom, until they've written 4 blog posts, right? And then they push all that content out in kind of a wave, and then they go dark. And then, maybe they're dark for a couple months or whatever it may be, and then they start up again. And I'm sure you guys see this in the podcast space too, is, you publish 3 episodes and then you're dark for 3 months and then you come back with another 2 episodes. And what that does is I think it says to our audience, again, whether it's a potential client for an agency or anybody else, is it says that you're inconsistent in your delivery. And that's not really a message that anybody wants out there. And, thanks to the Googleification of everything, it's all about being findable. And that's, how much content does your website have? How often do key phrases and words show up? And so if you're only producing content episodically and you're very hit or miss, your audience can't get used to the cadence. So, in my vernacular of the podcast, my podcast goes live every week and my audience expects there to be a new episode every week. And if I missed a week or I missed 2 weeks, hopefully I would get at least an email or 2 that somebody would be saying, hey, there's something technically wrong. Your podcast is missing, or, hey, are you okay? So they begin to count on when you produce good content that is genuinely helpful to your audience, you will build an audience, and the audience counts on you to deliver it consistently. And so you have to be very careful sort of what you bite off, because you want to make sure that you can deliver it. That was the biggest hesitation I had before I started a podcast was, is this something I can sustain? Mm-hmm. And once I figured out that, yes, I could figure out a way to do that, then, once you're in, it's like being pregnant. You can't be a little bit pregnant. You either are or you aren't, right? So,
Yeah, I love that. So we're going to be talking about a way that you can avoid kind of being hit and miss with your content, or just being very bland with consistent content. How can you create quality and quantity at the same time? And as you were breaking it down on the video on LinkedIn, I saw the other day, Drew, you were talking about starting with a piece of Cornerstone content to be the genesis of new content throughout the year. Can you speak to that as at a high level, maybe unpack a little bit how you guys do it at AMI with starting with a research project?
Yeah. So I get that it's a challenge to create good content day after day and week after week. And so I'm a big proponent of it. In fact, I'm writing a book around this topic, around this idea of cornerstone content. So for me, cornerstone content is something that's sort of big and meaty. And so it might be you're writing a book. It might be that you're doing a research study. It might be that you're launching a weekly podcast. So it can't be a blog post. It can't be a single video, but it could be a video series. But it's got to be something that's got some depth and a lot of information in it that will allow you then to sort of slice and dice it, as I call it, into other pieces. So the example that I used in the video that you're referencing is that every year AMI partners with a company called Audience Audit, and we go out and we do primary research on a topic that we know is of critical importance to agency owners. So for example, this last year, the topic was, how, when, and why do clients take work in-house as opposed to giving it to their agency partners? So it's a big piece of research. It takes us a couple of months to get it done and then to sort of do all of the analysis. And then we have this research. We have all this data. That's sort of the cornerstone piece of content. And then what we do is we launch from that all kinds of pieces. So obviously there's an executive summary from the research, and then we unveil that research every year at Content Marketing World. So we have a keynote presentation that we do, and then we do a webinar series off of that. So now you've got an executive summary, you have a keynote speech, you have a webinar series. Every question we ask has the data points from that question. So we can do blog posts or a video on each data point. So there's probably another 30 pieces there. Typically, we'll do 3 or 4 videos off of the content. We do a ton of social posts, infographics, Instagram, sort of just the graphs around the content, and then linking back to the executive summary that people can download. So it's pretty easy to see by the time you have tweets and Facebook posts and Instagram posts and infographics and a webinar series and probably 10 blog posts and all the other things I've already listed, it's pretty easy to see how you can get to 50 pieces. So look at that from a book's perspective. Same thing. Every chapter, you could slice and dice into 3 or 4 things. You could probably do a webinar on every chapter. You could probably build a keynote speech, certainly off of the whole book. So it's really about creating this one really meaningful, and I say it so sort of, I guess because we've been doing it for so long, I say it like it's not a big deal. I acknowledge this requires a lot of effort and work to create this cornerstone piece of content that is truly valuable to your audience, that it really does contain information that they want and need and will make them better at their job. But once you've got that done, literally, you could do nothing else for the whole year other than slice and dice that one piece of cornerstone content. And then you could have a whole year of great content for your audience. And then when you layer another piece, so for us, we've got the research that we do every year, and then we have the podcast, and then we have a couple other things. Now you've got quite a variety of content, all built off of, let's just say, 2 pieces of cornerstone content.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, slicing and dicing that, as you say, is not as hard as coming up with new pieces of content, especially if your boss is forcing you into the conference room with no bathroom breaks. That just sounds like a better recipe for success. As you were talking about it there, Drew, and something I picked up as I heard you share on this before, is that you can slice and dice this in ways to share or to create content for your channels, but you can also use it in ways to get access to other people's channels, whether that's their event, you touched on Content Marketing World, or other people's podcasts or webinar series, right?
Right. Yeah. So part of our strategy when we are done with the research is that we reach out to other podcasters and other people in our space, and we offer to appear on their show, or we offer to share the research with them in advance so they can share it with their audience. So there's lots of ways. I mean, it's great to serve your own audience, and that should be our primary goal. But one of the ways you build your audience, obviously, is to add value to somebody else's audience and kind of earn their attention and a channel that they've already given their trust to. And now all of a sudden they trust you too. So, we probably, not only do we do all of the things that I listed before, but we probably appear on, just with the research piece, not even talking about the podcast, but we probably appear on 5 or 6 other podcasts. We probably are featured in, we obviously send it out to the trade pubs and things like that, but we're also probably featured on 4 or 5 other key influencers, websites or blogs. Typically we'll get an article or 2 in the trade pubs. So we're really able to magnify our audience reach by leveraging other people's audience as well. And you know what? They're not going to invite us to do that when we want to come on and talk to them about a Pantone color, right? So, so you've got. I keep pounding on that because I think that's the part that's hard, is picking a topic and investing in it enough that you actually do have something unique to say. But to your point earlier, when you do that, so once the research is done, literally it's saying, okay, well, this week let's focus on question number 1. And you already have the question, you already have the data points, you already have the graphic. It's not that hard to do a video, a blog post, an Instagram post, whatever it may be. So it's really about doing the hard work once and then making the rest of the lift throughout the year pretty light.
Yeah. Giving yourself some leverage to move that big rock. Our team is reading a book right now called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, and talking about how lead measures can be the lever that move a very heavy rock. And in the same way, I feel like that Cornerstone content can be that lever that moves the big, heavy rock that is tough to move, of quality and consistency in your content throughout the year. I'm sure this is probably a deeper conversation and is going to have a lot of variables for folks, but any advice or just thoughts you could offer, Drew, on where to start? What should be your avenue for your Cornerstone piece of content? Is it maybe leaning into where you already have, your specialty? If you have a podcast going, maybe that's the spot. If you've done some research projects in the past, maybe that's the way to start, as you guys have done it at AMI.
I think you have to come at it from 2 directions. Number 1, I think, and the most important thing is, where can I have a voice that a whole chorus isn't already singing? So where is a topic or subject matter area that everybody in the world isn't already talking about? So that I can stand out. And number 2, I think you have to ask yourself the question, because in every of the case that I've told you about, it's not a one and done thing. We do the research project every year. We do the podcast every week. So you have to, in many cases for agency owners, what I ask them first is, are you a better talker or are you a better writer? So most people lean towards one or the other. So that to me suggests if you're a better writer, then maybe it is a book or a research project or something like that. If you're a better talker, then maybe it's a video series or a series of keynote speeches or a podcast, because you also have to get over the hump of, you have to keep doing this. So it should be something that you feel competent in. And ideally it's something that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Drew, this has been a fantastic conversation. I love this methodology. I think whether, it's a marketing team, a B2B business, or an agency, I think this approach can definitely help them with a very common problem of developing quality content consistently. I love the point that you made about, those fits and starts can really have a negative effect on your brand, as much as not putting out thought leadership pieces. So if anybody listening to this, Drew, would like to stay connected with you, ask you any questions about how you guys have been executing on this method in the future, what would be the best way for them to find you?
Best way is probably to head over to agencymanagementinstitute.com or shoot me an email at drew@agencymanagementinstitute.com, or, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. So happy to answer any questions or continue the conversation offline.
I love it. Thanks so much for being on the show yet again, Drew. This has been a pleasure.
You bet. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity.
Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. You know all those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.